I feel like you need those instances of what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerability. Vulnerability. Take the p out of my mouth. Welcome to A Cast with No Name. We are your hosts. I'm Jay.
And I'm Matt.
This is episode 50.
Yes.
Boom. This episode, we take a hit of SLO-MO as we discuss the 2012 action/sci-fi film, Dredd. But first, don't forget to visit our website, acastwithnoname.com, where you can comment on episodes, send in requests, all that good shit, as well as also you can listen to all of our other past episodes. So again, castwithnoname.com or acastwithnoname.com.
Hard to believe it's been over a year.
I know.
It's nuts.
You brought it up earlier, and I completely forgot.
Yeah.
I saw it coming as...
From the Batman to Dredd.
The Batman to Dredd.
It's flown by.
Yes. We were going to do a recap episode, to play our past hits of everything.
Like 90s sitcoms, where you just have a flashback episode?
Yeah.
Best highlights?
Yep, just best highlights. You know, typically that's something that writers do when they can't think of anything.
Right, it's called a filler episode.
Yeah, filler episode.
Sure.
So we were going to do that and just play past clips with no context whatsoever, but we decided against it. So now we're just going to talk about our past episodes. So you remember that one time when we said, I think we were talking about, oh God, what were we talking about?
We were talking about a movie, and then you said something sexist and
that's
stupid.
Right. Yeah, that was funny. That's pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
Good thing our audience hasn't reached that far, or else we'd have been fucked long ago.
I'm glad we only have tens of listeners.
That's
because
right.
If we had more, we'd probably have no jobs.
That's right. I agree.
So, but that's all right.
That's all right.
So, Dredd.
Yeah.
2012.
What, did you ever read the comic? Actually, did you know that it was based on a comic?
I did.
Okay.
What I did not know is that it was a comic strip first.
Okay.
Because I think it started in a British sci-fi magazine called 2000 AD.
Yep.
And I believe it started in 1976-ish? 77. And I think it was just a strip for each issue. I think it started, it premiered in the second edition.
Yep.
That it had. And then it kind of grew from there and eventually became its own book.
Yep.
I never read them. I didn't even watch the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd. Back then, I think I was aware that it was a comic book, but the Sylvester Stallone one just never interested me.
Yeah.
Don't know why, just didn't.
I only saw that one time.
Okay.
And back in the 90s, and I remember not liking it.
Okay.
I have very limited memory on it. I remember Rob Schneider in it as the plucky comic relief.
They must have hit it off in Demolition Man because I feel like
he got
went
that
from
for
that
sure.
to this.
For sure, yeah. And he was on SNL, so
yeah,
kind of a familiar face. But then I didn't know it was based on a comic book. I didn't even know it was based on a comic book until after I watched Dredd in theaters.
Okay. So that answers my next question was, did you read any of the comic books?
I didn't. No. Not at all.
So,
I've never been a comic book reader for the most part.
Because of the words?
Because of the words,
Literacy.
because I'm not particularly intelligent.
Yep.
So I like
small forehead.
I like things being spoon-fed to me.
You got the large brow.
Yeah, I got. This is where it starts and stops.
It rains, but your eyes stay dry.
I'm just staring dead-eyed at you. Yeah.
I never read the comics either, which I think is fine because it's interesting to watch something that is based on another property or another medium to see if it translates, because a lot of times if you go in there knowing of the comic or whatever material it was based off of, then you have expectations set. And it's incredibly hard, especially either from a comic or from a novel, because it's competing with your imagination and how you pictured it.
Right.
So I think it kind of is a little bit of a barrier to go into movies like that when you already have an expectation, as opposed to just going in completely blind.
And that's why I don't read, Jay, because I want to have zero expectations.
That's why you don't read.
That's why I don't read.
Okay,
That's
all right.
it. Yeah, it's pure.
It's
I want to enjoy myself.
You want to keep your virgin white dress
Yes.
as you go into films. I
Yes.
get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, same here. I didn't read it. This was the second time of me watching it.
Your second time.
Yes.
This is probably like my 8th or 9th, around there. I really enjoyed this movie.
Nice. Did you see this in theater?
Yes. I was one of the very few people to actually see this in the theater.
You were the one.
I was the one. Actually, when me and Nicole saw this, I think we were the only two in the theater.
Did you watch the 3D or 2D?
3D.
Did it look good?
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the slow-mo scenes were pretty cool. That's why it stood out at the time.
Yeah, I could tell watching this, the title sequence, which title sequence is just the
letters, yeah.
the letters, and some of the slow-mo scenes.
Yes.
I could tell was 3D, but something I learned is that they didn't want this to be 3D.
Yes.
It was kind of pushed on to the producers to try and because it was still during that post-Avatar hype.
Everything was 3D.
Everything was 3D.
Everything.
Worked really well for animated films because it was computer generated, so you could easily pull that depth to where a lot of movies that weren't shot for that and wasn't shot in 3D, you had that planar look to where everything looked flat, but just on different distances.
Yes.
To where everyone kind of looked like a cardboard cutout, I remember.
Yep.
And but I wondered, which I didn't get too much of this, other than the slow-mo, like beginning letters of Dredd and a couple of the slow-mo scenes, and then the first when they breach the building and they have the bullets going through the cheek and the blood coming out.
Yep.
I didn't feel like there was any overt shots where they shot that specifically for 3D kind of a thing.
Yeah. I was watching some extras, and the director of photography, again, was saying that he didn't want to do 3D, but they allowed him to create like a special camera. He liked the idea of depth of field by having close-ups to characters and giving it that comic book panel feel where you would have one half of the screen be like the character close-up, and then in the background would be somebody doing something.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot when rewatching this again. There's a lot of those shots, just close-ups where you're like, why is that a close-up right now? And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. They're trying to go with the 3D effect.
Yeah.
Well, field.
That, and I think they balanced that well because the overt, this was meant for 3D, didn't, I guess, stand out to me as much as the shots of, they shot it because it kind of, I mean, there's quite a few shots in here that look like a comic book panel.
Oh, yeah, for
like
sure.
Through the peephole, through like a bunch of different, like you said, close-up shots, depth of field, that helps show that still movement or whatever, which I feel like is another reason why they kind of developed the drug of slow-mo, is so they could kind of stabilize those movement shots that were probably very visual in the comic book.
Yep.
But again, I have no frame of reference because I never read the comic. But,
right. Well, let's get into so why did we pick this movie to talk about? I picked it because I called it a hidden gem, strictly because it was such a financial flop at the box office. So I'm looking at the numbers right now. It had a production budget of $45 million, and worldwide it made $41 million total. So didn't even make its budget back from the domestic grosses. But then you look at the DVD and the Blu-ray sales before streaming took over. This is, again, 2012. This is 11 years ago, back when people still used to rent and buy DVDs and Blu-rays. $22 million. So over half of its theatrical run was made back with DVD and Blu-ray sales, which is kind of unprecedented. Normally it's not 50% of the theatrical take. It's like, I don't know, 8% or something. So it found an audience on video. And the answer is why? Why did it not do so hot in box office or in theaters, but it kind of found its audience away from the theaters?
Nope.
And I think two things. Well, in theaters, it's like anything else. They had a shitty release date. It was like early September coming out of the box office. They didn't know how to market it. I remember the previews just emphasizing the 3D, and I think at that time people were just tired of like 3D gimmicky shit, and they didn't want to go see the next 3D gimmicky thing.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it works in animation, but I think we got tired of it not working for live action, like Clash of the Titans.
I got tired of it, and also, if you remember, the ticket prices were a lot more.
Yes.
Than they were for 2D, and I think by this time a lot of people were becoming wise as far as not every movie is going to look like Avatar.
Avatar, yeah.
And to where it worked fine with their cartoons and animated, but you weren't getting a lot of directors specifically shooting for the medium. I mean, you had Scorsese come out with Hugo, and you had a couple of directors. Who is it? Who did The Green Hornet? Was it Mark Forster?
No, that was Michel Gondry, I think.
Michel Gondry did Green Hornet, shot that in 3D.
Yep.
And actually, no, I think they converted that shit too.
Oh, that was after the fact.
Yeah.
Those are the worst.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
And, but I mean, a couple of the computer effects they redid just for that.
Yeah.
Whatever ghost effect they did for that movie. But I mean, other than Scorsese and maybe a couple others, you didn't really have any known directors playing with the medium. And I think Scorsese did it with Hugo just to see what it could provide. And obviously he wasn't that thrilled with it because it didn't. Which other than Avatar, I think Hugo's probably the best looking 3D. But he did it differently in a sense. He did it behind the window as opposed to less gimmicky out in front coming at you kind of a stuff. Like I think he had like maybe one shot kind of going through, but everything else he was playing with the depth of field, playing with the distance of characters,
right?
And
the spacing,
and trying to create interesting compositions that way. But yeah, 3D. I think people were getting tired of it. It was more expensive.
Yep. I don't think that. I mean, Carl Urban's known, but he's not well known to the point where you're like, oh, I got to go see Carl Urban as Dredd.
Mm-hmm.
I think that played a role in it. And Dredd, Judge Dredd himself, the comic strip isn't as popular as. Again, this is 2012, so Avengers came out that year. So I think at least American audiences or just audiences in general were they were in the mood for a different kind of comic book movie. Before, like a hard R comic book movie, those weren't really selling at all until Deadpool came out.
Yeah.
And again, and I think the fact that Judge Dredd came out and it's associated with the Sylvester Stallone movie, and that movie was so panned that people weren't like excited to see a revamped Dredd movie.
The only people that I feel like were excited to see this were people that were fans of the comic books.
Yeah.
Or wanted a R action movie.
Yeah. I think if this came out today, it would do better.
I think if it came out today, the action I think would be better.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, and I don't know if it's just because we watched 4 John Wick movies.
It might be
in a row, and then I come and watch this. This came out 2 years before the first John Wick,
and
I'm just like,
like
whelmed. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Carl Urban is definitely well known now because of The Boys, and than what he was back then. I was aware of him because of Star Trek, but also he played Woodrow Call in Comanche Moon, which is a miniseries that is a prequel to Lonesome Dove. So he played Tommy Lee Jones's character. That's pretty much what I knew him as up until that point, up until he started playing Bones in Star Trek.
Right.
And
the old Lonesome Dove reference.
Yeah. And then and then of course he was in Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
But he wasn't. Yeah, I mean, he was in whatever star power he had or recognizability he had. Unless someone was following him distinctly, you wouldn't have known that he was in this movie because he never takes his helmet off.
Right, he's like the Mandalorian.
Yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, I think. Yeah, and I don't know if it was just too dark for people at the time as far as people wanting comic books, because I mean a lot of people went to the comic book movies because they were family friendly. You could take your kids, and like anything, rated R movies don't typically do as well as PG-13.
Yep.
But yeah.
So, let's say, what's it about, Jay? In a violent, futuristic city where the police have the authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner, a cop, teams with a trainee to take down a gang that deals the reality-altering drug SLO-MO. So yeah, that's essentially the movie.
Yep.
It's Dredd is out there training somebody. They go to make a call at a complex called Peachtrees, and hell ensues.
Hour and 35 minutes.
Hour and 35 minutes.
Tight.
It's brisk. It's a tight
like a toiga.
It's not a 2 hour and 50-minute burn like Chapter 4 of the John Wick series.
Yeah, you're not. You're in and out.
And the strange thing is that it takes place in this fictional city called Mega City 1. Apparently, America's been bombed out and it's in nuclear fallout or whatever. You don't really hear any background of it, but everyone's condensed in this gigantic city between Boston and D.C.
Yeah, it's one city, 800 million people, and they have these giant towers.
Yeah,
housing. I think what Peachtrees
70,000.
70,000 people in Peachtrees.
Yeah,
and which is just an interesting concept because I always think of Sim City. I don't know if you ever played that.
I had
back in the day. There was cool people, and there was probably you. And the cool people played Sim City alone in their bedroom, and they had these buildings called Argopolises or Acropolises. I don't know. Big ass buildings where it houses a lot of people, but it's a dense residential area.
I got you.
And so that's what it reminded me of. But it was like people would live, work, shop, and everything within these giant structures.
So you're watching this movie and you're like, oh, this reminds me of when I was alone.
Damn,
in my room,
I want to play Sim
watching
City.
Sim City. Playing Sim City. Nice. Yeah, so that's what it is. It's in this highly condensed city where just, bad things happen all the time. And he's a part of, what is it, the Hall of Justice or the...
Hall of Justice.
Hall of Justice.
And, yeah, so he's a judge. Starts off, he's chasing down three perps.
Yeah.
In a van.
Yeah.
Intoxicated.
On slow-mo.
On slow-mo. And he fucking kills them.
He kills them. The sentence is death. So, yeah, he tells you the crimes you've committed, and then he passes the sentence right then and there. There's no jury or peers, none of that stuff.
Yeah, none of that shit that gets in the way.
What do you got? You go to the jury? You got 800 million people condensed in one city. You don't got time for that.
Yeah, I was watching this. I was like, man, this is closer than we think.
Well, yeah.
Police brutality. It's fun.
It's fun. It's good. It's a good movie.
They make movies about it. So, yeah. So a shithole of civilization. And
it's not good.
Which I find it interesting that the strip started in the late 70s in England, and back then they even figured that's where we're going to end up as far as which I don't know if the whole world was like that or if it was just our country. I'm assuming it would be the whole world. But yeah,
they decided to make this, to set it in America. They said because America's just larger, and it made more sense to have it in that large space of land than on the British Isles. That it would just be the entirety of the island, and have that make sense for 800 million people. Yeah,
it makes sense because I mean, even Europe as a whole. I mean, that's a tiny fucking place. Compared
it is pretty tiny.
Post-apocalyptic. You're introduced to Dredd right off the bat. He's on his little motorcycle.
Yep.
Kills some people, and then he gets stuck with a rookie or trainee for the day. And
what's up with Anderson? Why do people love that name?
It's so generic. It's like John.
I immediately thought of the Matrix. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Come on, guys.
Well, they open up a last name book, and the first one is probably Anderson, and that's why they're always in there.
Yeah.
It's unassuming.
And this movie was written by Alex Garland.
Yes.
I like him a lot.
And may have been directed by him.
It's not directed by Pete Travis?
Well, depending on who you ask. So with this movie, Carl Urban was in an interview, and he had stated that Alex Garland had actually directed this more so than what whoever is
Pete Travis
had done. Then, depending on who you ask, is Pete Travis wiped his hands of the project after principal photography, and Alex Garland is the one who was kind of calling the shots in the edit room.
Interesting.
And then, depending on else who you ask, was Alex Garland actually had more of a hand in directing than what Pete Travis did. And with the amount of work that Alex Garland did, because he didn't have a feature directorial job already under his belt, they were wondering about him getting a co-director credit on this because of the amount of work that he's done. But then I think Pete probably got his tail feathers in a huff or whatever, panties in a wad. There you go.
Panties in a wad. There you go. Come on.
Him and Alex Garland talked it out, and then he said, "Oh no, he's no longer seeking a co-directing thing." So, whatever reason.
Whatever.
So,
Sounds like
I'm sure there's a bunch of BS that went on behind the scenes that, because I looked at other Pete Travis stuff, and it was a whole bunch of fucking nothing.
A whole bunch of nothing.
And
yeah.
but Alex Garland is the one that kind of had the career after this with Ex Machina and Annihilation.
Yeah.
And some of other things. So I kind of have a feeling he more mainly had a hand in this than what he did, especially in the directing sense, because you have Domhnall Gleeson, that shows up in Alex Garland's first quote unquote movie Ex Machina, and I feel like at least he had been on set quite a bit to where, or unless Alec Garland just reached out to him, and
could be. It feels like an Alex Garland movie.
This one does?
Yeah, it does.
So I haven't seen Ex Machina, and I haven't seen
Annihilation.
Yeah.
You watch this in certain sequences, I'm like, this is like Annihilation.
Yeah.
Yeah, feels like it.
So
You've never seen Ex Machina?
I have not.
It's a great movie. It's one of my faves.
I hear it's good.
It's very good.
I just never got around to. I have a feeling it's not a uplifting movie.
It's not. No.
And so that's probably why I've held off.
It's not uplifting at all.
Because I'm rarely in the mood to be like, you know what, I want to be sad.
It's not sad either. It just has interesting themes, and it's just a good story.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Oscar Isaac's great in it, by the way. But back to Dredd.
Yes.
So, anyway, he has this trainee. They go on a call to Peach Trees, and they're investigating a homicide of three people. And they find someone who they think committed the murder, and they try to take him out, but he's knowledgeable of this giant drug empire that they have going on, this distribution and manufacturing thing that they got going on in this building. And Mama, who's the drug overlord, decides to lock down the building and
cuts off all communications to
the outside world.
And
then you have a Raid Redemption movie going on.
Yep. So they're trapped in this building, and they have to survive until they can get the blast doors back open or they get backup.
Yep.
And then that's the movie.
That's the movie,
It goes on from there. So Hidden Gem, what is it about this for you that makes it a hidden gem?
One, that nobody saw it, and I'm recommending that people see it. If you again, it's an hour and 35 minutes, so it's tight. It's a tight movie. You're not gonna waste an entire day watching this movie. It separates itself, I think, from other comic book movies because there's no backstory to Dredd. You kind of just jump in there, and it's not a nice little story. There's nothing. There's no expanding the universe at all. It's all one location for the most part. The action, I think, is great. Even today, John Wick is better, but for the budget they had and the constraints, it's very good, visually appealing. I thought Carl Urban's great in it, even though you only see his mouth. And if he had that scowl the entire shoot, I'd be like, oh, my mouth is just, I can't. I'm gonna smile just a little bit, but it's just a fun movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the point that you said about no backstory just kind of dumps you right into it. I like it when movies do that, to where no explanation. They do there's a quick Carl Urban voiceover at the beginning telling you what kind of world you're in. 800 million people in a city, and they live in these towers, and there's a wasteland outside of the city, and inside the city is actually also a wasteland.
Yeah.
But they don't go into it. They don't have exposition dumps throughout the movie to catch up.
No.
It's you're right in the middle of it and you go. And another movie that I think of that does that is Cool Hand Luke really, really well. Where
We're comparing Dredd to Cool Hand Luke.
Now, two totally different movies, but Cool Hand Luke does that to where you're just dumped right in. You don't get backstory to any of the characters. You're just, there's Paul Newman cutting the heads off parking meters, and away you go.
Yep.
And same thing here. You don't get backstory, but they also have terminology that they don't expand on, but you pick it up. So when they come across dead bodies, they're like, oh, we need these for send an ambulance and recyc.
Yeah.
And they keep saying recyc. So, but they don't expand on it, but there's enough there to imagine, okay, 800 million people. Yeah, they probably recycle dead bodies to grow food or to use whatever whatever kind of resource and nutrients that you can get from a dead body. Not that they're eating people, but they recycle them because they got to reuse everything because resources are probably at a premium.
Yeah.
But just like little things like that they don't expand on, but are just there.
Yeah.
Same thing as just these massive towers housing 75,000 people, and they tell you just enough to let your imagination kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Like wonder it allows you to think about how shitty life must be living in these giant structures, and being trapped essentially, and surrounded by nonstop crime.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's very, I like the world building because I feel like they do just enough to where you kind of want more of it, but they don't spoil anything. They leave some of the things open to your imagination, which I think is, a great thing that this movie does very, very well.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like it has to explain anything.
Right. There's a lot of movies that make that mistake where they just add too much to the one I'm thinking of right off the bat is Conan the Barbarian with Jason Momoa.
Okay.
Where they try to explain everything in the world within the first 15 minutes, and you're just like falling asleep because you just don't care.
It wasn't because of Jason Momoa's acting?
No. I think if they would have treated that movie kind of like this, where they just jump into it, still would have been terrible, but at least
because you build onto the world as time progresses. You don't need to dump everything.
Yes, like all this exposition and narration. It just, I don't know. You're trying to catch the audience up when you know that they don't have the backstory of the character because they're not that popular. Like popular characters, movies like Batman or Spider-Man. Unless it's the origin story, you're not going to have that exposition. People already understand the world. Like Super Mario Brothers, I just saw that movie. There's not a lot of world explaining.
Yeah,
it's just you're dumped in the world. You understand where you are, and maybe you have a few snippets of dialogue here and there, but you don't dwell on it for longer than a couple minutes.
Yeah. The other thing I like, one of my favorite concepts that this movie does is so at the beginning. There are 3 homicides that happen at Peach Trees, and that's what drives. There's a call about it, and 3 homicides at Peach Trees complex, and Dredd leaves it up to Anderson, the rookie, to decide what call they're going to go on.
Yep. And
she says, we're going to go to Peach Trees. And with her full well knowing that it's one of the most violent
residential
areas.
buildings, megastructures.
And
they like saying mega in this world.
But
mega
structures.
Mega peen. Mega boner.
3 inches of fury. But when you but you see on the LCD, like on a screen or whatever, you see the 3 homicides on a map.
Yeah.
And then the map kind of expands out, and then it keeps expanding out to where, three murders happen in this one building. But then you expand out to a city block, and there's like 12 murders. And then you expand out more and more and more into where now you're in individual sections, and you see multiple sections. It gives you a sense of scale of this city. And it's not even the whole city. I think it was just a very, not even the size of a state. It's probably
a district,
Yeah, maybe the size of like 4 or 5 counties.
Yeah.
And just the amount of the population density, but the amount of crimes that happen. And then they follow it up immediately with Dredd saying something along the lines of, there's so many violent crimes happening every minute. And we get calls for like there's like 12,000 calls or something a day or something ridiculous, into where we can respond to 8% of them or 6%, like something insanely small. So you get an idea just from that. Within, I think the whole thing took 12 seconds in one line of dialogue. You got the sense of just how violent this place is, without one showing all that violence, but two, without someone just sitting. I mean, granted, Dredd said, yeah, we get this many calls a day, we can only respond to this much, but they showed you that the way they showed you, which all good movies will show you and not tell you.
Right. Show you and not tell you. That should be the ethos.
But just the sense of scale, that what these people are dealing with and what this law enforcement's dealing with, and the amount of shithole that all these people live in. It was. I just really like that part of the movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was very, very effective to do it quickly and put you into their situation.
Right. And do you even think that would work in like a real situation? Like if you were living in a city like that, and only 6% of the time, if something horrible happened, would somebody respond to it?
I don't know. I don't know if a population could be that dense and that violent without tearing itself apart.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, if you look at the pandemic and like when, like in New York, like massive cities or like larger cities were trying to deal with it. I mean, the shortage in grocery stores and everything else, and that wasn't even horrible, but that was also only for a couple weeks, more or less. I mean, things were shut down they would shut down restaurants and stuff, but I mean, as far as, okay, everyone stay home, was only a couple weeks. China, it's been worse. But just this, just one building, 70,000 people. I would feel like the resources, and on top of the violence and that many people being that close together, I feel like everyone's world would either shrink to where you live in your apartment, or maybe a couple of floors and that's it, because you don't want to travel outside of that, because then you're outside of your safe zone. I feel like people would be a lot more contained, or the society would just rip itself apart to where it would have to disperse, because people couldn't thrive in that environment, because it's not a tribal mentality. It almost feels like everyone's trapped there. But.
And the whole judge, jury, executioner aspect of it makes sense in that world, because if you can only respond to 6% of crime, awful crime at that, and you're that densely populated, like you're not going to have a system where you're going to have a court date.
Yeah. You're not going to have arraignments and shit, and
because you don't have enough people. And if the crime is so outlandish, where there's a crime committed for every there's like a 50% crime rate for the citizenship. Yeah, you're not going to be able to process these people the way you should. So it's like, all right, well,
you need to be efficient.
We'll nip it in the bud, and we'll do it on the spot then and there.
So,
so it weirdly makes sense. Even though it's just an awful, like, nightmarish thought to have that world actually exist.
Yeah, and I think that's my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah,
and I enjoy this movie. I do think it has. I agree with you. I think it's a good movie that I think a lot of people don't talk about. But I mean, I do think there are quite a few flaws that I think probably contributed to not a lot of people talking about it, as far as like the general public's concerned. I mean, Dredd fans, I think, love this movie.
Sure.
A lot of people wanted a sequel after this movie. And I think Alex Garland even, he had 3 different treatments, and one was super extravagant, like based on one of the popular storylines in the comics, but he said it was too big. So he was thinking, is like, well, if we get to do a third one, this will be the story for the third movie. And so he kind of, he had escalating stories. He picked the smallest one,
right?
Because it was more manageable, and especially on a lower budget.
Sure.
But I do think one of the things I feel like probably was a detriment to this movie is you're kind of along for the ride of the story. And one, there's not much story. It's almost like a day in the life. And
yes,
you're going along with them on one call. That's all it is. And which I like that. And I feel like if I was going to turn this into something, it would be a TV show where each episode, like similar to Sherlock, to where you'd get 3 episodes a season. Each episode's an hour, hour and a half, probably an hour and a half. But it would be something like this, smaller stories, but maybe not center on Dredd as a main character, but he's involved in every story, to where it focuses on a different character. Because one thing, I felt like this movie, you were just kind of there, you were present, but I really didn't feel like I was rooting for anybody in particular. Looking back on it, I feel like it's more of Anderson's story.
Yeah.
Than it is Dredd, which is perfectly fine, which I think would work, especially with more movies like this. You could have a side character and they're kind of ushered by Dredd, or it's about their interaction with Dredd.
Right.
And you would get to know him through those secondhand experiences or those firsthand experiences of those characters, which I feel like if it was drawn out with more instances, it'd be very, very interesting to do a character study that way, to where you just get a bunch of different people's perspective of this person. Just because in this movie, you don't get backstory to him. He doesn't really necessarily have an arc, which, are we talking spoilers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk spoilers.
So the only arc really is at the beginning of the movie is he's looking at Anderson and he says, nope, she failed the exam. She failed by 3 points. She failed.
You gotta go by the letter of the law.
Yep, letter of the law. Like black, everything's black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end of the movie, she ends up confessing to him because he rattles off all these criteria that would make her fail
Right.
Her assessment. And by the end of, towards the end of the film, she says, I already failed because I lost my weapon. It was taken from me. It was blah, blah, blah. Like she lists several things that made her fail. And then he ends up passing her.
Right.
I mean, it's such a small thing, but that's like really the only kind of arc that he has. The only other thing too is like he doesn't seem very relatable in that sense either. One, because I think part of it, you don't see his face, and he kind of feels more like RoboCop, but I feel like RoboCop did it a little bit better as far as the acting.
Gotcha.
From nose down. Not to knock on Carl Urban at all. I think it was just better directing in RoboCop. You were able to express emotion to where he felt almost emotionless.
Mm-hmm.
And even when the building was locked down, and it was kind of more of the survival portion of the story, and then they say, well, we could also go after her. That's our other option. So then it kind of more turned into a hunting story to where they were more on the attack. It didn't feel like a sense of urgency on his part to where he didn't really feel scared at all, and again, didn't read the comic books. It could be true to form for his character, but with comics, they've had 40 years to develop his character. And if it's a character I'm supposed to care about, then I feel like that's something I needed a little bit more in this movie. Or if he is supposed to be kind of that stoic Clint Eastwood type of character, that RoboCop, that robotic, everything is black and white, here's the letter of the law kind of character, and that's his point. And that's the point of that character, and he's supposed to play off someone more human. Then I think that worked, especially in the case of Anderson, to where then it should have been her story and getting more of her perspective of that character, as opposed to, and starting off the movie with her as opposed to starting the movie off with
Dredd.
But that I feel is like the biggest weakness of it. But again, it's still a good movie. It's just you don't have that sense of desire to either, at least on my end, to want to be that character or want to follow that character more like a James Bond kind of character, to where you want to be him, you want to experience his kind of things, or Iron Man, you want to be that kind of smart person, to where he was just kind of very stoic and not lenient. but he got things done. I mean, there's redeeming qualities to him. He's not an asshole. It's just he's just a hard character, I feel like, to get on board with immediately, especially in an hour and a half movie, especially not knowing anything about him either.
Right.
So
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think that the arc was just enough because the movie was so short and because the mission that they were on was so like snappy. I thought that they set it up a little bit when they were evaluating Anderson, and she asked the chief or whatever asked Anderson, "Am I the only one in this room?" And she said, "No, there's another male judge with you. I see anger, but that's not the only thing. There's almost," and then they cut away. Like they didn't let her finish her thoughts. So that to me, that was enough to give like the audience a clue. Okay, there's something more than just him being a stoic asshole who's like a letter of the law kind of thing. And then I thought that the arc at the end where he said she's a pass. You could, and then even before then when she rambled off like, I dropped my weapon and I already failed. Let's just get this shit done and then get out of here. You could see that he was like, oh, okay, she's, there's more to this girl than meets the eye or whatever. I thought it was enough. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and her point, I thought they were going to call back to that moment.
They didn't, though.
They didn't. And which the way they handled his character, again, I think would be perfectly fine if they had more instances after that. Because I feel like if they opened it up to where you introduce this character through the eyes of a psychic, and she mentioned something, but maybe it doesn't get brought up until movie 2 or story 2, story 3, to where like that kind of long-term character development, I think would absolutely work. Right. Because I would want to see more stories of this character for that slow burn character development. Because I feel like doing that, at least kind of peeling back a little bit of that onion every time you see him, so that way you just kind of grow to like him. I think that would work very, very well. It's just hard to do. Again, I mean, but his small arc for this small instance in the course of a day, absolutely. I think that's great. I just wanted more of it. Right. I feel like, but I think it could have really paid off, especially if this turned into a trilogy or series. I feel like it would have been a character that you would have at least started to understand complexity, or at least given you a little bit more insight to for who he was.
I agree with you. Yeah, you have to. You want to root for somebody when you're watching a movie, and you're right. The arc's enough to satisfy me, but you're right. I would have enjoyed to. I wanted to root for him more, but then the movie kind of just ends, which I get. I mean, he only had so much,
and we're drawing on bullshit here, but I think it would be. A really cool concept as far as taking a character like this to where having it be from a certain character's perspective. Like, so you have a rookie trainee, you get her perspective of how this character appears. And then like the next movie, maybe the main character is a child and it's somebody that Dredd has to protect or something. Right. So then you get like this larger than life like character to where a lot like you're not really seeing the real person. You're seeing what people perceive as this character, to where he's kind of then you start creating this kind of mythological idea of who this man is, even though it may be accurate, or maybe it's just not accurate because you're going through an unreliable narrator from a child or from a rookie who's only had one which I think would just be a cool idea in general to do a character study on an established character like that. It would just be, I mean, for example, you could do it really well with Batman, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that would just be a cool concept that I feel like they could do with this character.
Yeah, I think having a TV show, like it said in this Mega City 1, would be pretty cool.
Which they brought up. I think they tried to do a TV show, the BBC or
they did?
British. They tried to do a British television show, and back in 2016, I think, and obviously it didn't go anywhere. But it was going to be about different judges. It was just going to be in that world. It wasn't going to be
A
Dredd thing, but Carl Urban said he was willing to go and reprise his role if it made sense for the story and made sense for the character.
Right.
Which I think could have been
That would be
interesting,
cool.
just because the world that exists there is interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It's very. I think their set design is great. It's just that, I mean, it feels like government housing. It just the utilitarian structure, like nothing's pretty.
No. It's all gray and blocky and
then
concrete.
But what's interesting is there's still advertisements, but it's just not everywhere.
Yeah.
And which makes sense because I'm like, yeah, I mean, who has a job doing graphic design in fucking Mega City 1? We're like, oh, God, I got to get this out.
Yeah, true.
Got to go to the printers and pick up a banner for our new sandwich.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're going to get shot or run over by a random drug addict in the street.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, the world that they created was great, but that as far as, I mean, maybe they didn't want it to be Anderson's story because then it maybe would have been too much like Training Day, which there's some Training Day here, but that was the other thing to where in Training Day, spoilers for Training Day, when they're in the house, when Ethan Hawke's in the house and Denzel Washington leaves him there with the Hispanic gang members.
Yeah.
That whole scene, the first time I saw Training Day, I think I was probably, I don't know, like 16 or something. When it was like shortly after the movie came out. And I was watching that scene. I was like, oh, shit. And then they throw him in the bathtub. Like, I'm just like,
yeah.
Is he going to, like, it put me on the edge of my seat. I didn't feel that here. I feel like when Anderson was captured, that should have been that scene. It should have been, oh shit, to where, but I didn't feel a sense of fear or anything. And part of that could be training, but it's like, I feel like you need those instances of, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerability. Take the penis out of my mouth. Vulnerability.
Yeah.
And
you want that emotional beat
a little bit, like, because I feel like that should have been, because he even tells her 1 in 5 trainees don't make it out the first day.
Right. And you never got the sense that Anderson was in trouble. You thought everything was going to work out.
Yeah.
And I did too.
And
I agree with you.
So that would be the only other thing, is just that sense of tension.
Gotcha.
I think could have been done a little bit better.
Gotcha. It's fair.
But Christy stayed up the entire time.
That's good. Well, it's an hour and a half. I hope so. Jeez. Can you make it? It's an hour and a half. No, I think with the success of The Last of Us and that dour world, I think you could definitely do a TV show that's set in this city that would be compelling and fun to watch. Mm-hmm. I mean, hell, you're adapting every other comic or video game nowadays. Why wouldn't you want to do it to this? Yeah, and I feel like this would lend itself well to, hell, all the networks and every show loves to have a cop show. Oh, yeah.
Have this be a cop show.
For sure.
And I feel like that'd be fun to watch.
It would be
it'd
fun.
be different. Of course, then it'd probably just turn into CSI and they'd all throw shit up on the computer.
Law and Order SVU.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Who's the perp? And then there's like a 5-minute scene of exposition where everyone's like, it's like a choreographed dialogue scene where they're all given one bit of the he's a money launderer. Bob said he went down the street to Bob's Groceries the other day. Yeah. Bob's Groceries is a Bob, and then the next character.
You get the intern that walks in immediately in that room. Hey, I got the file from the fax came through. Or whatever.
Yeah, the fax came through at Bob's bank accounts. Yeah. Turns out he made a transaction on January 9th.
These are the sharpest tools in all the fucking boxes.
Made a transaction on January 9th, and then the next guy comes in. That's the same day that Bob was with blah, blah, blah. Where are we going? Susie's, and then cut to Susie's house. Great writing.
Yeah. God, I hate those shows.
I do too. Dude, Nicole loves. She stopped watching Law and Order finally in NCIS.
Well, they're on like season 62.
I know. I don't know why people still watch them and why they find it compelling.
It's easy.
It's like it's like American
they
Pie.
always get them at the end.
It's like apple pie.
Yeah.
Or people feel like they're part of the mystery and they solve it. So when they write about solving it, they're like, I solved it.
Yeah.
I'm one step ahead of the criminals.
Right there with them.
I'm right there with them.
I could be a cop.
I could be a cop. I could do this.
As they're sitting there in their pajama pants at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
No offense to our listeners, but we're kidding. You guys
but we're judging you.
Listening to it on your commute.
Me and Jay are actually going to do an episode about NCIS next week.
Only season 1, though.
Yeah, the first one.
The week after.
Yes. Oh, boy.
One nitpick.
Sure.
All right, so at the end, Cersei Lannister has the detonator attached to her arm.
Sure.
And that's attached to some bomb
somewhere
in the building that will knock down the whole tower and kill everybody.
Yep.
And that's her last ditch effort, to where she says, "Oh, if you kill me, this is attached to my heart. It's monitoring my heartbeat. And if it loses the signal of my heartbeat, then the bomb will explode." And then Dredd, who not the best at logic, I feel like, said, "Well, do you think it would read it through 100 layers of concrete?" Meaning that he was going to throw her over the edge. And when her heart stops, she would be all the way at the floor. And I was like, well, that's a good thought in theory. However, if the signal doesn't transmit through 100 layers of concrete, then the signal of her heartbeat wouldn't transmit through 100 layers of concrete. And the bomb isn't going to know, oh, you're just out of range. It's just, I'll blow up now because she's out of range and I don't detect a heart. You get what I'm saying?
I get you. I thought about this.
Yeah.
I thought about it watching it, but the only explanation I could come up with was maybe if her heart stops beating, then it sends a signal to tell the bomb to explode.
So it's armed, but it's like,
right.
But when it,
so he's just betting that she'll be out of range.
What a dick.
I know. He's like, I guess we're just gonna find out.
I was waiting for the camera, like after she dies, and like I was like, the camera goes back to him. I was waiting for him to be like, "Shit, I can't believe that worked." Like Anderson walks out, he'd be like, "I saw it was 50-50, honestly, Anderson, if that thing was gonna fucking blow."
It would have been funny if he said that, and then Mama was like, "Fuck." Like, damn it, I didn't even. Yeah, someone acknowledged it. Someone acknowledged like I could be right, you could be wrong. It probably would have been funny if Mama was like a look of disappointment, like, I didn't even think about that, but didn't happen. So. But no, I thought about the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait a second, what if it's connected, and then she's out of range, then the connection stops, and then we blow up, right? But then I was thinking, oh wait, what if it's like pushing a button, like it's armed? And the only way it gets set off is if another signal...
It's receiving a signal of the signal of... So it's like a true-false value.
Correct.
To where it's doing true, and then as long as it
doesn't
do
receive
false,
another signal of false, then it doesn't blow up. I don't know.
Maybe that's it.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
We're going to write Alex Garland. We're like, hey, listen, fucker. This is something that you need to address now.
Right. Right now. Email everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I like it. I recommend everyone see it. I think it's a really good movie.
I thought it
doesn't get the praise that I think it deserves.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone did very well. There was only I think the drug addicts at the very beginning in the van, they were a little over the top, but I mean, but other than that, I feel like everyone's acting was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't cheesy. It was believable. It wasn't. It's just not that cartoonish that you can kind of come across. In some
I liked
things.
Lena Headley and Mama because she didn't take any shit.
Mm-hmm.
She was just straight up mean. There was no like snarky, sarcastic, stupid dialogue.
Yeah.
Like, somebody get Dredd now.
Yeah.
You know, I want his head on a spike. I want his heart on a plate. No, there's none of that stuff. It was just, she was kind of just reactionary and very like vicious.
Yeah. She didn't tell Domhnall Gleeson, oh, you better do a good job or I'm gonna kill you. It was nope. You just get introduced to a knife on his belly.
Yeah.
And because she already gouged out his eyes.
Yeah.
And
it's established. Show, not explain, right?
Yep.
It's the golden rule.
Yeah. Olivia Thirlby.
I only remember her in
Anderson?
Juno.
I do not remember her in Juno.
She was Juno's best friend.
Okay. I only saw Juno once. And that came out in 2007?
Yeah, a while ago.
16 years, 16 years. Jesus.
I think I've seen it twice. It's been a while.
I saw it once.
The only thing I remember about that movie is when Michael Cera is like he's a cross country runner and she makes a comment about the pork swords. Because I used to be a cross country runner, and I was, you're always self conscious about your junk just flapping around. I was like, yeah, that's about right. I can relate.
Yeah, I remember I was J. Jonah Jameson. God, that's not his name.
J.K. Simmons.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, I'm looking at these other movies that released with it, and Resident Evil Retribution grossed more money.
Jesus.
That makes me very sad. Into Watch came out at the same time, grossed more money. I do like that movie. Into Watch is a good movie. That's that cop movie with
Michael
Jake
Pena
Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
It's really good. Trouble with the Curve. It's that Clint Eastwood movie with Justin Timberlake. That grossed more money. House at the End of the Street. That was a Jennifer Lawrence movie before Hunger Games was really big.
Huh.
That made more money. Jesus. Oh, boy.
Yeah. I will say, out of all those movies, I would want to watch this one.
Yeah. There's Dredd, number 140 on the domestic box office, right ahead of Playing for Keeps. I don't even know what that is.
Playing for Keeps?
Playing for Keeps. I'm looking at it right now. It's got Gerard Butler.
Oh,
it's a romantic comedy starring Gerard Butler. Don't even remember that.
Yeah, neither does Gerard Butler.
Jesus Christ. Jessica Biel, Gerard Butler, and Dennis Quaid.
Oh, Jessica Biel?
Jessica Biel.
Oh. Back when she was in movies.
Back when she was in movies.
Well, hell, I wouldn't do anything either if I was married to Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, why would you? Yeah. I recommend see Dredd. It's very good.
I recommend to do. I mean, it's quick. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
I feel like they just needed a better hook. I feel like because I mean that short amount of time. Again, if this was like a TV show or something, they could take their time doing that stuff. I feel like this could have been. They could have easily turned this into a pilot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but it's fun. It's got some great ideas, and
I just don't think Judge Dredd has the appeal to warrant a movie that's going to have enough success to be like financially profitable.
Yeah, and this is before streaming. Really, this was before everything was being snatched up, and I mean, this is where big ideas went. So, I mean, you had television, but it's like no one's going to give. I don't know. It was tougher back then. I feel like than it is now.
Yes, very true.
But no, I agree. It's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah. Where'd you watch it, by the way?
Where did I watch it?
Yeah. Do you own it?
Oh no, Hulu. Yeah.
Hulu.
So it's on Hulu right now, as of this recording, and I believe you could also rent it from Amazon for like $4 or something like that.
Not bad. It's worth $4.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, it's definitely worth the rental. It's quick. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, decent acting.
Yeah. Anything else, Jay?
I don't think so.
All right.
Alrighty. Well, join us next time as we fall into a thirst trap. Jeez, fuck that up.
Great job.
God damn it.
Awesome.
Just fuck it. We'll just shut it down. See you. Talk to you later. Join us next time as we fall into a thirst trap as we try and answer the question: is Waterworld really that bad?
Interesting question.
It is interesting.
Yes.
Get it? Thirst.
I got it.
Water, because
You're
drink.
a genius.
Fucking, I'm a wizard with words.
You are.
As long as I don't have to say them.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to, pronounce them.
So, but yeah, that'll be our next episode. Is Waterworld really that bad? So Kevin Costner, Dennis Hopper,
Oh, yeah.
and Mad Max on the water.
That's right.
Smokers.
That's right. They're called smokers.
Smokers.
I haven't seen this movie in so long. Awesome.
Hopefully it's streaming somewhere because I do not own it.
I don't either.
I'm sure
We'll figure it out.
It's got to be somewhere.
It's on Tubi. It's got to be.
Tubi.
Tubi. It's got to be. It's probably on Amazon or something.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
All right. Don't forget to comment on our episodes at castwithnoname.com. All that good stuff. Thanks for listening. Until next time, Matt.
Until next time, Jay.